Okay, welcome to the AdaptX podcast, where we have discussions with individuals who are building inclusive and accessible businesses or products, advocating for inclusion, or excelling in adaptive sports. Our intention is never to speak on behalf of those with disabilities, but rather amplify their voice and ideas so you can build more inclusive and accessible businesses as well. Today, we're joined by John McKenzie, a husband, pastor, disability advocate, and probably much more that I'm looking forward to learning about. So, John, thanks for coming out to Lancaster and joining us.
No, thanks for having me on.
So ironically, 17 years ago today, right?
Yeah.
Your life changed pretty significantly. Maybe how often do you think about that day and kind of what do you recall from it?
I mean, the day itself, it was a day really just like today is, it was a summer day, beautiful, and I don't think about it often until the month comes and, sneaks up on me. The longer out I get, the less I kind of remember it. But I remember the whole day, I remember the accident, remember everything that happened. I can go into detail if you want on that
Yeah.
whole
Yeah,
thing.
if you want to maybe give us a little bit of insight into how it happened and what the environment was like.
Yeah, I grew up just like any really, average American kid, had a lot of fun, did a lot of stupid stuff. And it was just August 9th, 2006 is when it happened. And a group of us were out skateboarding. We ended up that night at our local McDonald's in Orange, Mass. And it was like, I don't know, around eight or so. And I was part-time landscaper at that time. And my mom called me, told me to come home. I didn't go home because I didn't want to, miss out on any of the fun stuff going down at the McDonald's parking lot at 8 o'clock at night in Orange, Massachusetts. But my friends asked me to go for a little less joyride around town and said sure. Hopped in the back seat. As we were pulling out of the McDonald's parking lot, another car full of kids pulled up next to us. Asked the driver for my car if you want to race, turn left. Next thing I know, we're going 100 miles an hour in the opposite lane. There's a long straightaway when you leave McDonald's to the left. There's a corner at the end. And as we went around the corner, the car lost control. It spun about three times, rolled a bunch of times, went up a banking, up a tree. And when it landed, I was in the back seat behind the passenger and right next to the door. And so the door fell off. And when the car landed, the top half of my body was out of the car. The rest of my body was in the car. So the car landed sideways on my neck. And so it broke my neck. I remember pretty much the whole thing rolling through the air in the car. It was like this weird slow motion, like
Yeah.
weightless feeling. I remember waking up with the car on top of me and everyone was just screaming. It was utter chaos. And thankfully, I was the only one that got hurt that night. Everyone else climbed out of the sunroof without a scratch on them. And I remember being put into the ambulance and taken to a Athol hospital. And then I didn't know I was paralyzed at that point. I never broke a bone or anything prior to that, surprisingly, with growing up racing motocross and all that stuff. Um, but I thought my legs might have been broken. And but then they shipped me in a helicopter to UMass in Worcester, and everything gets fuzzy from there.
Yeah, yeah. Do you still keep in touch with the other people that were in the accident or?
It was kind of a weird scenario. I was in the car with one of my childhood best friends and a bunch of other kids I was pretty close with. And after the accident, everyone just kind of bailed.
Hmm.
You know, uh, I've talked to maybe them two, three times in the last 17 years. And, when it first happened, it was a really kind of jarring experience because, I was never the kind of everyone handles this injury different, right? Everyone handles becoming disabled largely different. And I woke up with just the attitude of, this is my life now. I'm gonna let God use it for whatever He wants to, and I'm just gonna keep pushing forward. So I never had a real depression state, and so I never understood why everyone like just bailed on me. At 17, it's kind of a interesting thing to think about. I'm like, I'm just the same kid that I was
Mhm.
6 months ago. I'm just sitting down now. But so no,
Do you hold any animosity towards
I
any of them?
probably during the time I was a little frustrated.
Yeah.
Like it was more along the lines of like, well, what's wrong with me?
Mm.
That my friends who I was so close with don't come around anymore. But I've way forgiven them. It's like I always say, when we got in the car that night. nobody was like, hey, be really fun? Let's go paralyze John,
Yeah.
It wasn't an intentional thing. We were just young kids
Mm.
doing young kids thing. And then,
Yeah. Yeah.
but, but yeah, so that contact kind of, it was strange,
Yeah. You're now our third guest that's had an SEI, and there seems to be a similar theme, at least in the first two, Jesse and Tim, where they kind of talked about how their life was better after their disability, or it changed them in a lot of positive ways. Can you identify maybe some ways in which your life improved after your SEI?
Oh yeah, 100%. I always get asked like, would I go back? If I could go back in time,
Yeah.
would I?
Mm.
Right? And I mean, yeah, would it be great to walk again and not deal with constant nerve pain and all the fun stuff that comes along with having an SCI? But everything I've learned over the years, how this accident has shaped me as a man, as a advocate, as a just my whole mindset, it's really been I hate to say beneficial,
Yeah.
but it has,
Yeah. Yeah.
pre-injury, my life was surrounded with partying. I was pretty wild,
Mm.
very rebellious, and after the accident, it kind of screwed my head on straight a little bit,
Yeah.
and it really taught me a lot about adversity and just pushing forward no matter what. And it just made me so grateful to be alive, because I could not be here,
Mm. Yeah.
and a
Yeah,
lot.
you talk about being able to walk again. That's another thing that seems to be a theme in the SEI world. Like, was that a goal initially with rehab?
Yeah, see, what I've discovered in this is there's usually two camps
Yeah.
in the spinal cord world. There are people who, and there's no wrong way I feel each camp. I'm not bashing one or the other, but there's usually either people who are focused on walking again. They want to do everything they can to walk again,
Mhm.
and that's their goal. They put everything into their rehab. They put everything into that goal, right? Or there's people, the camp I fall into is walking again was never really a goal, but learning just to live my life as it's been given to me, get more independent,
Yeah.
just learn to live with this disability in a world that's not accessible really in the least.
Mhm.
So I've always been about, just these are the cards I've been dealt,
Yeah.
and I'm going to try to push forward the best I can.
Yeah.
And I kind of had a different case where, like, when I was injured, I was so sick.
Mhm.
There are people who are injured, and like when I was in rehab, I don't think I went to more than like 5 sessions because like I couldn't,
Okay.
for the first 5 years of my injury, like it was really hard.
Okay.
I left rehab on a stretcher to go home
Mm.
because I couldn't even sit up.
Okay.
But I kept passing out,
Okay.
and it was really hard.
Do you want to recount and maybe detail some of that rehab process?
Yeah, so when I got hurt, I was taken to ICU, and I was 6 weeks in the intensive care unit, which is longer than most stay in
Okay.
for that time. And I was on a vent, and they did pretty good there. And then they shipped me to Boston Medical Center. They used to have a spinal cord wing up there. They don't anymore. And when I got there, it was still, I was so sick. I was on the vent. I couldn't sit up. Just getting me, to raise my head up in bed was a big deal. I had a
Mm.
lot of blood pressure issues.
Okay.
And so every time they tried to take me to therapy, I would either pass out on my therapist or throw up on my therapist. And my therapy experience was terrible. No fault to my PTs,
Yeah.
but just to how sick
Mm.
that I was
What do you
during
think was
that
causing
time.
that?
It was like one thing after the other,
Yeah.
tons of infections, respiratory issues, trying to get off the ventilator. I was on that for about 4.5 months.
Okay.
And it was just straight up chaos.
Yeah.
You
What
know,
was the ultimate thing that got you discharged, or at what point did they decide that you were ready to go home?
it got to be in December. So I was hurt August 9th. I left rehab on December 11th, I think it was. And I wasn't ready to go home.
Yeah.
But I think they could see that being in the hospital that long was starting to take a toll on my mental health.
Yeah.
And so they were like, we're just gonna we're gonna move forward and get you sent home. And thankfully, I have since day one, I have had a very strong support system with my family, and so they knew that I would be taken great care of. And so then I went home, had a lot of home PT, but that really didn't accomplish too much either. Uh, I spent some time, which was helpful. About a year or two later, I went to Shriners in Philadelphia. They had like a 6 to 8 week boot camp for spinal cord
Okay.
injured people. I was a little healthier then.
Yeah.
And so that helped a good little bit, just getting my bearings.
Yeah. What kind of led you to turn a corner? You said like you were really sick right after. Like when did things start trending upwards?
It wasn't until about 5 years out.
Okay.
I was in and out of the hospital so much for those first 5 years. And I had a really gnarly staph infection in 2010-ish. It was in my hip, and that almost killed me. It took a ton of surgeries to get it all cleaned out. And it seems like after that, um, things just slowly started to get better. And in the meantime, during this first 5 years of horrendous health issues, I never stopped pushing forward. A year after my accident, I re-got my license. I started driving again. I always just kept kept trying to set little goals, even though they were like I always wanted to be in a manual chair. I said if I had two arms, I'm going to use them the best I can with my injury. And so just like I'd go for pushes for the best I can, which is maybe around a parking lot or something. And, just these little goals that for an able-bodied person seem like nothing, but to me it's like climbing Mount Everest, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I mean those were your goals instead of walking. Instead of putting all your effort into walking, it was
Yes.
getting back to being able to exist in your environment.
Yes, just to be able to live a somewhat normal
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. So you're C6?
Yes.
C6, yeah. So for people who don't know the levels of SEI, how does that like manifest with like gross motor and fine motor function?
Yes. So a lot of times people get really confused when I tell them I'm a quadriplegic because they can see me moving
Okay,
my
so you're moving
arms
your
and
arms.
you see me fidget quite a bit.
Yeah.
That's from my nerve pain. We can
Yeah.
talk about that after too. But so yeah, if I had broken my neck at like C1 or C2, 3, or 4, I would probably not have like any movement, maybe some shoulders or
Mhm.
things like that. But because I broke at C5, C6, I'm able to have biceps. I have biceps in both arms. I have a tricep in my left arm, which I don't have in my right arm.
Okay.
And I have like real strong wrist function. And so that's about it. I'm paralyzed from the chest line down.
Mhm.
But yeah, so it's an impairment in all four limbs as a quad, and
Any
yeah,
grip strength through the fingers and
no, I
no.
don't have any grip strength in my fingers, but we can use tenodesis, which is a very fancy word for when you bend your wrist, your thumb will kind of automatically reach and it'll grasp to your pointer finger. It's
Okay.
hard to hear that through a voice, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, what was like what were there OT and PT interventions that kind of got you that function, or is that what you had initially and that's just kind of
For
still
me,
what you have?
everything is I have been the same, but just stronger.
Yeah.
You know, I got injured with all this function that I have now. It's nothing really, it's just the everyday life of being paralyzed.
Yeah.
I've gotten stronger.
Yeah.
One of the biggest, most important things that I was able to use and that helped me massively was YouTube.
Mm.
And that's why I love social media so much.
Yeah.
Because I remember after I was injured, like I said, I didn't have a really good rehab experience. And so I would go on YouTube and I would see all these quads my level and showing how they live their lives, how they get dressed, how they transfer. And that's really what helped me. YouTube was just seeing other people with my similar injury be able to do things I didn't think were possible of doing. That just it gave me so much motivation and hope to see that, there are people out there who are taking care of themselves the best way they can and, learning how to be independent. And that was really that's what I call like a lot of my rehab was through YouTube,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And that's why I think social media is, like everything, it has some massive downfalls,
Mm.
but it also has some really positive things out there,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. Yeah, the remote fitness is obviously became more popular with COVID, and remote rehab. And I don't know if it's definitely not a entire replacement for in
No,
person, but like you
no.
said, like for people, there's a lot of people that don't have the means of
Mhm,
getting to a gym or getting to a rehab hospital, and
mhm,
so it's not the importance of kind of making it accessible online is pretty big.
mhm.
You mentioned nerve pain. Kind of how do you manage that, and how does it manifest?
Oh yeah, nerve pain is like if I had a choice between could you walk again and keep the nerve pain or stay with your injury and not have nerve pain,
Yeah,
I'd be paralyzed all day, you know.
yeah,
Nerve pain is for myself, it's probably the hardest thing that I have to deal with
mm,
because like 24/7 my body is just burning constantly. And as you can see it when you're in person with me, constantly wiggling and
yeah.
twisting. And it's just that's usually from my pain,
Okay,
and that's kind of just one way I kind of cope with it is to stay moving. And
yeah. Are you able to sleep through the night?
yeah, a lot better than I used to.
Yeah,
There used to be times where I'd just be awake for like 2 nights at a time, and
mm,
that just takes a massive toll
yeah.
on your mental health,
Everything.
your
Yeah,
physicalness. It's just, but yeah, I mean, I've been on medicine for it, but it doesn't really do much
yeah,
17 years out. What I've come to realize is, distraction is a huge thing for myself,
yeah,
staying active and whether that's playing a video game for a little while, just anything to get your mind off
yeah.
of your pain.
Are there any surgical interventions or no?
I've heard of some things like spinal blocks and things like that, but I don't know how well they work exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder. Before your accident, did you have a career in mind, and then kind of maybe how did you get into this career that you're in now?
Yeah, so pre-injury, I grew up racing dirt bikes my whole life, and when you have a sport that you love so deeply and passionately, you want to do that for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
So that was the goal. I got to a decently high level with that, and in my 17-year-old mind, I thought I was gonna be a professional racer,
Yeah.
and that didn't pan out, obviously. But again, going back to my rebelliousness, I dropped out of high school at 15 years old,
Okay.
left school because it just wasn't my thing. So it's some people's things. It wasn't mine, that's for sure. And so I got a job landscaping, and I did that up until my accident. But I had no real like career goals or really anything. I was just kind of living day by day,
Mm.
week by week. And it wasn't until after my accident that, as soon as I woke up in the intensive care unit, I felt that this happened for a reason. I grew up in a Christian home, went to church on Sundays and all that stuff, but it was never really real to me until my accident. And that's when my mind started shifting. And I said, I just want to use this um, for whatever God wants for me, and I had no idea what that looked like at 17 years old, laying in the intensive care unit. But I knew I wanted to help people, whether it was high school students. Pastoring wasn't in my mind frame yet at all. Um, but then after my injury, I started going to church again, and I wanted to serve any way I could. And a couple of years later, I met with people from the Johnny Erickson Tata. I don't know if you're familiar with her,
No.
Johnny and Friends. Um, they have a foundation where they help so many disabled people do a lot of cool things. And I met with one of their representatives and I asked them, like, what should I do? What's my next steps? I want to do something to help people. And they kind of pushed me in the direction of, why don't you go back to school? Again, hated school,
Yeah.
left at
Mhm.
15 years old. That definitely wasn't in my plan, anyways. But I ended up going back to school. I got my college degree. I went for ministry and became a pastor.
Yeah.
you know,
What was that like? Because there was probably what, 7 or 8 years between dropping out of high school and going back into college?
yeah,
Six or
that
seven
was
years?
that was weird.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did all my classes online again
Okay.
because I was so
Yeah.
sick and
Yeah.
everything. But that in itself takes a lot of self discipline
Yeah.
to do that.
Did you
And
find college to be a much better experience though, because it was something that you were passionate about? Like sometimes high
yes,
school just isn't
yeah,
suitable for
I
people.
think I was just lost
Yeah,
in high school, like it just, this had more of a goal in mind, like I got to get through these years to be able to do what I want to do.
yeah,
And so I did enjoy doing my classes. It gave me something to focus on. It gave
yeah,
me a different, like I realized this time around that, education is pretty important, and it's a blessing to be able to, not everyone can do that,
yeah.
so
I wouldn't identify as a deeply religious person. Me and my wife and I got married in a Catholic
yeah.
church, and I understand the importance of that as a sacrament. And we went to church growing up. But
Mm.
do you think living like uh, living the way I do, I guess, or like the work that I do, and like the care that I like give towards people, is that like a manifestation of religion as opposed to just like weekly church attendance?
I mean,
Is there a way to be religious without going to church?
well, that's a loaded question. I mean, in my beliefs, I believe that God designed us to be in fellowship with other Christians.
Yeah.
I think the work you do is wonderful, and I think that's a God-given talent and a
Mm,
and a God-given gift to have that desire to help other people. You see that all through Scripture, right? I do very much believe in the importance of church attendance.
yeah.
And not that going to church doesn't mean you're a Christian.
Right.
No more than me sitting in a garage makes me a car.
That was almost what I had a little bit of trouble with, was just going to church but not always understanding
Yeah,
what I was there for or
yeah,
what I was listening to.
yeah.
So it didn't feel like it was adding a ton to
And that's
my
totally
faith. Yeah.
understandable, and I think it depends, like for myself, like say high school wasn't a good fit, I didn't get anything from it. If you're going to church and you're not believing with something that's applicable to your life, it can feel like you're just there listening to a bunch of nonsense
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. What's your process for preparing a sermon?
It takes me about 40 hours or so to get my messages done.
Oh.
And so I dive pretty deep in there, but my whole motto is, open the Bible, teach the Bible, and then sit down and shut up.
Mhm.
Um, we are kind of a no frills kind of congregation. I uh, I keep my messages around 25 minutes, and I just go through each verse, pick it apart, and get the meaning of what the original language said and what it meant for their hearers in that time, and then how it's applicable to us today.
Mm.
You know, so that's very important.
Yeah.
To
Was it an acquired skill? Because obviously giving a sermon's public speaking. Do you feel like you've improved a lot over the years in terms of how you deliver sermons?
I would definitely say so. So again, when I was first injured, I knew I wanted to help people. I figured my story had some value in it to even help. My main goal at that time was speaking to high schools and driver's ed programs.
Yeah.
And when I got my first opportunity to go to a school and share my story, it was 2008. I get up in front of these kids, a small classroom, I froze. I didn't say a word.
Mhm.
I couldn't speak. I had to leave. It was a mess.
Yeah.
I left there going, well, that's not for me.
Yeah.
I'm done,
Yeah.
And then 3 years later, the pastor of the church I was attending asked me if I'd be willing to share my story. And I was like, oh man, I can't do that. There's no way, but I didn't want to say no. So I did it. And from that point on, it's gotten easier and easier and easier.
Yeah.
Um, but it all depends. I speak weekly. I speak sometimes more weekly. I come here today and I'm nervous here.
Yeah. Hopefully not too nervous.
No, no,
Yeah.
you're a great host, and it's just public speaking is nerve wracking.
Yeah, it always is. Even I mean, in the same lens, like me preparing for these, I'm trying to play the conversation in my head, or at
Yeah,
least think about what I want to talk about. Like I almost didn't want to mention that religion piece
yeah,
because I don't have the chops to really have a thorough conversation about it. So it's like what should I mention? What should I not? And I have all these different things that go through my head, but then it's like finding ways to articulate it within the flow of a conversation is sometimes tough.
Yeah,
And we do put a good amount of time into like preparing for all
sure.
these episodes and doing research about the guests and stuff. But um, do you consider it motivational speaking, or do you have thoughts on like motivational speaking as a whole?
See, I kind of separate the two
Yeah,
from the like from what I do at church on Sunday, and then say what I do when I go to Monty Tech and speak to the driver's ed programs. I would say that is when I speak at the high schools and whatnot, it's usually a more motivation, but motivation to make the right choices in life and to not, I speak a lot about safety and making smart choices and how each choice, whether you realize it or not, affects your future. So I feel like I give them some motivation and try to help them and guide them into realizing that, don't mess up your life so young. You got a lot ahead of you. And I truly believe that, you can really do whatever you want to do if you put the time into it.
yeah,
And like I always say, I'm not saying you're going to be president of the United States,
mhm,
but crazier things have happened. So
yeah.
maybe so.
I wonder if like so you're encouraging people to not do dangerous things that could hurt themselves, which is obvious. But you say like mess up their lives, and in some ways your life got better after your
Yeah.
accident. So not that that's the lesson that you would want to communicate to someone, get a spinal cord injury, your life
Yeah.
might improve. But
Yeah.
is there ever any like friction between those messages, or do you ever relay the positives of your injury?
Well, I definitely will relay the
Yeah,
positives. It's usually more of motivation with like an underlying
yeah,
that you don't want to take the route that I took.
yeah,
I'd rather not take the route that I
yeah.
took. Um,
Because you can come to grips with improving your life without
yes,
the injury.
yeah. I would have rather learned all the lessons that I learned now without having to deal with the pain, the suffering, and
Right.
all the heartache that comes along with spinal cord injury.
Yeah.
Because no matter how much we try and sugarcoat it, this life is hard.
Hmm.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
Some of us may make it look easy, but there is still a lot of weight to carry around on a daily basis. I'm a 34-year-old man that does stuff during the week that no 34-year-old man should have to do,
Yeah.
whether that's bathroom stuff
Yeah.
or other stuff that comes along that you don't see.
Yeah.
So I try to motivate these kids, but just motivate them to make smart choices
Yeah. Yeah.
in their life, especially when they get behind the wheel. I
Yeah.
remember when I first got my license, I was wild,
Hmm.
and it's not worth it.
Yeah. We typically ask some of our guests with disabilities of like their thoughts on the inspiration narrative. Like, do you ever get people that say that you're inspirational and kind of what emotions does that evoke or like
Oh man, I get that all the time.
yeah.
I can't go to the grocery store without someone thinking Mount Everest on my name. I get a box of Cheerios off the shelf or
There you go.
something.
Yeah.
But in some ways, there are people who get really offended by
Mm.
it. And I totally understand that. And in a lot of ways, I feel the same. I mean, we're just living our lives. We're not here to be an inspiration for you
Mm.
unless it's in the setting of, say, a motivational speech or something like
Mm.
that. But yeah, I get that all the time. But I do know that a lot of people say that, like in the grocery store or at church or anywhere, a lot of them it comes from a good place.
Yeah, it's always well
You know,
intentioned. Yeah.
it's well intentioned a lot of times, even though there are times where it's kind of offensive,
Yeah.
right? So I try to give them grace,
Mm.
because like if you don't live this life, if you're not in the field, say you're in,
Yeah.
and they don't really know,
Yeah.
you
It's like they
know,
don't even know what else to say. Like they don't
yeah,
even know how to start the conversation.
yeah.
For some reason. I'm not sure what that reason is, but
Yeah, it's
it is common.
just there's a lot of people who I just don't think know how to handle when they see someone so different
Yeah.
from themselves.
Yeah.
It's like they look at myself or people like me, and it's like they're just so I don't like to say it, but it's true, weirded out by it in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
They don't know how to act.
Yeah. So when we think of like what has to be done to make gyms more inclusive and accessible, or really any business or environment, it's kind of like normalizing the inclusion of people with disabilities
Yeah,
and just not to like see beyond the wheelchair, not to ignore the fact that you have a
yeah,
disability, but just to view it, I guess, maybe as another characteristic of yourself as an individual.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I agree with that as well. I mean, because it's like and then there's a whole other, if you go to the whole other end, and there are people who are like, well, I don't even see your disability,
Yeah.
and at the same time, that's not entirely correct to say either,
Mm.
because when you go to that far, then you're like just dismissing the struggle, the ableism,
Yeah.
the lack of accessibility we face every day,
Mm.
and so there's like a balance there. Just in my opinion, just I'm John, treat me that way,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know, and but it's again, I don't fault a lot of people like some people might,
Yeah.
because like I maybe might not know what to say to someone in this position if I wasn't in this myself,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Maybe kind of expanding on that point, we can talk a little bit about etiquette. Um, how do you feel about the term disabled versus maybe some of the more politically correct quote unquote terms like differently abled?
Yeah, again, there's different camps for that as
Yeah.
well. But a lot of myself and most everyone that I'm in contact with in the disability community who has a disability, what I've discovered is 9 times out of 10 they want to be called disabled.
Yeah.
Because like when you use terms like differently abled or things of that nature, it can often feel like you're trying to minimize the disability aspect, and you're trying to make disabled less offensive in your mind. That's how I feel, anyways. Like we're disabled, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
We don't have to call it other names to make yourselves more comfortable.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I've read about it as almost a strategy for someone without a disability, like you said, to just feel more comfortable or
yeah,
like feel better about themselves for
yeah,
using this different phrase. But there's some people whose entire model of inclusion revolves around person first language or terms like differently abled and in some ways, but then I see the disability community that's like, oh no, we hate those things. So it's like, so it's tough to relay. So if I'm teaching a new personal trainer, a new fitness professional how to work with someone with a disability, there's so many nuances.
mm,
It's tough to make blanket statements like this is how
yeah.
you communicate with someone with a disability. What advice would you give? So if you went into a gym for the first time and you were ready to work with a personal trainer, what would you want them to ask you or how would you want to be treated?
So if I put myself in that scenario, I come into your gym, right? And I would obviously, this goes without saying, want to be treated just like any other member that comes in. And I think the worst thing that a person can do is assume, right? If, say, a trainer comes up to myself and just grabs my chair, and starts helping without asking first, I understand that their heart is probably in the right place, because they see someone that might look like they need help, but you always got to ask first, right? Like, hey, my name is, I don't know what this trainer's name was, Trainer Todd. Okay. Trainer Todd comes up to me and says, hey, my name's Todd. And I want to introduce myself. And, you just start a conversation like a normal person would. And then I would want that person to say, um, I don't want to assume that you need help, but if there is anything I can do to make your time here more accessible and I can be of any assistance, please don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's assuming competency and then having just an open line of communication with
Yeah.
what needs or what
Yeah.
supports they need.
I think most people can tell when someone's being genuine, and I think that goes a long way. Like, not everyone's gonna be able to word things perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, I might, I might be offended by differently abled, and then you might get two other people who prefer to be called differently abled or something like that. So I think we're pretty smart at seeing genuineness, like this person just wants to help,
Yeah.
but definitely my biggest thing is not to assume you need help, just ask and be respectful about it,
Yeah.
you know.
What type of questions are kind of off limits and what questions do you not mind being asked?
Myself, you can ask me anything.
Mm.
No, but I know there are people who are more easily, I guess you might want to, I guess you'd say offended,
Yeah.
um, who don't really just even want to be bothered when they come into a place. Again, I think the most appropriate thing to do for a physical therapist would be like, is if there is any way that I can help you, please just communicate with me what you need and I'll help you.
Yeah.
Like, what are your needs,
Mm.
and how can I better help you um, get done what you need done?
And that's why we try to demystify is not the word, but we try to lower the perceived barrier of entry for fitness professionals to like more inclusive options. Because I think sometimes people think it's like a highly complex, you need all of this advanced schooling, you need all this advanced equipment. Um, when in reality, I would hope that every gym finds ways to be more accessible, just like we call it like incremental universal design, just like slowly making changes
Yeah,
that improve the accessibility of something. But oftentimes, like you said, it's just like the genuineness of the staff and the conversations they're willing to have with people, understanding your unique needs in the same way that we're trying to understand our neurotypical adults' unique needs or our high school and collegiate athletes' unique needs. I guess the presence of a disability just becomes another thing to
yeah,
consider when writing a workout. But
yeah. Because like if you think about it, like if you go up to an able-bodied person, you ask them what they need help for, and it's really just the same thing.
yeah,
You're there to help that person whether they have a disability or not. Just try not to assume that they, need certain things that, and a lot of times for myself, what drives me nuts and happens so often is like when people talk to us like we're children.
yeah,
And that happens a lot,
yeah,
and so it's just about being respectful, treating that disabled person really no different than you would treat an able-bodied member in the gym. But at the same time, just ask with respect and genuineness, like, how can I help you?
mhm,
If you need help,
yeah.
you know.
What do you think needs to be changed? Is a question we usually ask people towards the end of the conversations. Like, what do you think needs to be changed to make gyms or the fitness industry as a whole more inclusive and accessible?
And again, it depends. I mean, I think just like today, like how you guys have the buttons outside, the
Mm,
flat entrance, it's so easy for me to get into, right? A lot of gyms and places don't have that.
yeah,
They have doors that are like I couldn't even open on my own if I tried to.
yeah,
And again, no place is perfectly accessible, right? There's going to be a learning curve, and there's going to be, like you said, incremental changes, right? But I think for fitness professionals, listen to the disabled community, and really try to hear how you can help their individual needs. Try to make things more accessible, try to keep in mind the space between equipment for wheelchair users and even just the level of certain equipment things and stuff like that,
yeah. Yeah, that's why we wanted to um, trim some portions of this conversation to include in the content that we teach, because I've always liked your approach to etiquette that you put out on social media. Um, so we'll plug that your Instagram handle. It's the Wheelie Life
The
Official,
real life
the
official.
Wheel Life
Yeah.
Official. And what's that platform been like for you in terms of like growing it and why'd you start it?
And it's been great. Like I said, social media has always played a big role in my life, starting with the YouTube stuff and seeing how much they helped me. And I kind of just started that Instagram on a whim because I was bored one
Mhm.
day and I wanted to be able to share my real feelings about disability and not have to filter myself and I just wanted to share the things I've learned and hopefully help some other newly injured patient or person who's been hurt 20 years and just needs some encouragement. And so I started that one day and I just try to put out content that's real, that's directed at people like myself, but at the same time, someone who's an able-bodied fitness instructor like yourself can read and think,
Yeah,
oh, okay, that makes sense. I'm gonna try to implement that
yeah, absolutely.
and learn from that.
Yeah. Do you plan out content or do you usually just like identify a problem or something that happened in your life and think to yourself like, oh, I should share that?
When I really started growing and things were kind of happening, and I was getting, I don't have a massive following or anything, but like a little bit, but like I really was super diligent,
Yeah.
I did, like, I had certain days I would record my reels, and then certain times I would talk about disability history, and I would schedule those posts in advance. But as we've kind of gone with everything, sometimes it's planning out a week in advance. Other times I just wake up in the morning and something strikes me. I'm like, what, I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to rant about this a little bit, and
Yeah.
we'll make a post about it.
It's awesome. Can you can you maybe plug some products or businesses that you're familiar with that are either making like good products for people with disabilities or
Oh yeah,
doing stuff that you use?
I got a lot of really good friends. Cool thing about the disability community is it's kind of tight knit, even though we really all live across like the country from each other.
Yeah.
Some of my closest friends, they're like so brilliant. You've probably seen abilities on Instagram.
So that's ability and then the word ease, right?
Yeah, it's
Abilities.
AB ability.
Yeah, we can plug them or
Yeah,
include a link.
no, he's great, and he just I don't know where his mind goes, but he just comes up with the coolest 3D printed stuff to
Yeah,
make life easier for us,
yeah,
and it's pretty cool. There are people who, at the same time, don't like using adaptive equipment, and that's fine too.
yeah,
And at the beginning of my injury, I hated it. I didn't
yeah,
want to be any different from anyone else, but as I've grown as a person and gotten more comfortable with my disability, I just want
yeah.
to use anything that helps me
Yeah, that's probably
move
that's
independently.
yeah, that's an interesting topic because I have a client post stroke who seems to adopt that perspective where he doesn't want to use
Yeah,
adaptive things, and I'm like, well, if it helps you do what you want to do, then it might be useful in the same way that
yeah,
I have to wear glasses to see,
yeah,
and
yeah,
someone has to wear a
yeah,
hearing aid to hear. Like sometimes the adaptive technology just allows you to do what you want to do.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, that's great, and I'm glad all those resources exist. And I hope that I can have conversations with people like that and share those, share what they're doing and share their experiences and what they've learned. Like I said, I mean, it's tough to put myself in a position of like teaching the course that I
Yeah.
teach because I don't want to speak on your behalf or I don't want to speak on the community's behalf as a whole. But I recognize that I might be in a position to bring some of this content
Of
to
course, yeah.
people. So it would be foolish for me to not at least do my best. And hopefully, if we make mistakes or suggest something that's not important, that people have the grace to just see that it's always well intentioned. So, but that's why these podcast recordings have been great because it allows me to just have transparent conversations and kind of work on the edges and work within the nuance of disability. And hopefully, the people that take my course will also listen to these because they're great supplements for the more like exercise science related stuff that we teach. But
I think you guys are doing one of the most important things, and it's giving disabled people, a platform
yeah.
to share.
Because they might not go after, or they might not find someone like you
Yeah,
unless it's through someone like that's already in the fitness
yeah.
space. So hopefully we can kind of be that segue to introduce them to people that can speak on a lived experience better. But John, it was a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming out from Orange to Lancaster, talking with
It's,
us today.
it's my pleasure. Thank you for letting me rant for a while.
Thank you for listening to the AdaptX podcast. Our effort to amplify the ideas of our guests and create more inclusive and accessible industries is futile unless these episodes reach a larger audience. If you enjoyed our discussion today, please leave us a rating or a review on whichever platform you use. And if you would like to learn more about AdaptX, the course that we teach to health and fitness professionals and the projects that our organization is working on, you can subscribe to our newsletter through our website, www.adaptx.org. Until next Monday.